We began the conversation last week about how young is too young for a child to be spending time in front of a screen. Well, today, Caitlin Muller is back from Red Door Pediatric Therapy, and we're going to take a further look and form a family media plan. Before we look ahead to today's topic, let's go back a little bit and review the age appropriateness that you would suggest as far as how much time kids spent on screens.
Yeah, so the information comes from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and they do recommend 0 to 18 months really avoiding screen time other than just video chatting. And then 18 to 24 months, you can start to introduce some of that high quality programming. 2 to 5 years, try to limit that screen time to about 1 hour per day and still keeping it to the educational content. And then 6 years and older, just placing consistent limits on screen time.
Okay, now too much screen time, you were saying earlier, can actually inhibit someone's language ability and their ability to form speech.
Yes. So what infants and toddlers need to develop their language is that back and forth interaction with somebody else. And so if they're watching a screen, it's just a one-way interaction. It's not real life back and forth. And so research actually shows that even having the TV on in the background can affect a child's language development. And so normally a parent speaks about 940 words per hour if there's a toddler around. And if you even have a TV on in the background, that number drops to about 170 words per hour.
Really? Because people are distracted by it, or why is that?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
And so it's really that back and forth conversation and interaction that children need to develop language.
Okay, today we want to talk about developing a family plan. What do you mean by that?
So the American Academy of Pediatrics does recommend establishing a family media plan, and this is basically just a plan for how your family is going to incorporate screens or electronic media into your family, and then including limits on media as well. So they say that you can revise it as you need, as your children get older or as the needs of your family develop.
Okay, how do you go begin establishing a plan?
So just some things to think of. You might want to designate some media-free times together. So this would be maybe thinking about a rule that we're not going to have screens out at dinner time.
Okay, that seems like an obvious one because that's a time for conversation. Everyone's facing everybody, you know, and it just seems like that's kind of a given, but people struggle with that, don't they?
You would think, yeah. And even like bedtime.
Yeah.
So like, you know, child going to bed without a screen in the bed with them. And then maybe thinking about designating some screen-free locations in your home. So again, maybe no media in the bedroom. Maybe having kids turn in their tablet or their phone at bedtime. So kind of going into, again, that wind down time. So maybe thinking about, maybe we should have a plan of turning in our screens an hour before we go to bed to really get into that routine of winding down. And then really thinking about how parents can be models too. For this
well,
plan.
And you and I talked about that before, and you know, I'm guilty of it myself. It's so easy to get caught up in you got to check your work email, or you should answer this text, or you should do whatever. I would think that if you start a child early in the sense of there are limitations with this, it's just not free reign, it's a whole lot easier when they're 16 years old to still have those rules apply than it is to try and start it at 16.
Right. And so that's why it is important to develop a family media plan. And, you know, I don't think it's ever too late to start, but yeah, it is a good idea to get that going when your kids are young. And then as parents, modeling that plan for them. So maybe we even charge our phones out in the kitchen versus charging our phones in the bedroom. Maybe we have a real alarm clock that wakes us up in the morning.
That's a good point, because kids will emulate, and even if you don't say here's what I'm doing, they will see that how you're practicing your screen time as well, and it won't be as difficult to try and wean them away from hours and hours on it as well. We're only down to about a minute here that we have left. Is there anything else that you want to cover as far as this topic? Anything you want to reinforce?
You know, I think thinking about older kids and teenagers, really having those conversations about online safety as well. thinking about what social media platforms are they on, thinking about how am I going to monitor that. Parents really being knowledgeable about what apps their kids have on their phones, what social media platforms they're using, and kind of figuring out how am I going to monitor that as a parent, but still have trust with my teenager.
That's so key. You're not doing it as a punishment, you're doing it to help them and explain probably why you're doing it. Where do we find Red Door Pediatric Therapy?
We are located in Bismarck and in Minot.
All right, there you see the addresses, the phone number for both locations, and then anything that you want answered, you can probably find right there at reddoorpediatric.com. Thanks so much. Such useful information, and it's so easy to let that get away from us and not to follow through on that. So, Caitlin, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back with more North Dakota Today right after this.